hello there.
Hello again. I actually disconnected the Wi-Fi because the Wi-Fi in this house is kind of spotty. Maybe the LTE will do better
Okay.
for us. So, would you like me to go ahead and start that
Yeah,
bit
why don't
over?
you start that bit over?
Okay, and hopefully it'll stay connected. So, my history in gaming goes back quite a bit. I grew up gaming. I played everything from Nintendo and all that when I was little to Dungeons and Dragons as I got older, and just everything you can imagine. I
Mm-hmm.
was playing Legend of the Five Rings, which is a game that AEG produced way back in the 90s. And from that, I moved into Warlord, and that was about 2000, 2001. I sent my resume off when at Gen Con. I gave it to AEG actually,
Mm-hmm.
and told them, if you have any openings, I'd love to work for you. And at that time, I had been a play tester and I had been sort of a volunteer and ran some community stuff back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And a few months later, I got an email response from John Zinzer, our president, and said, "Hey, if you'd like to come out to LA, you can manage Warlord for us."
Oh
And of
wow.
course, I flipped out. I was like, yeah. And then my lovely wife cried for a little while and then agreed to come. and so,
As most people do when they realize they have to move to LA.
yeah. And so we moved out here and I began working for AEG on Warlord
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and worked on Warlord for a number of years. And then I moved to take over Legend of the Five Rings and the whole line, the role playing, card games, everything. Ran that for a number of years. In between there, we had our first child, so we moved back home to the South to be near family again.
Mm-hmm.
But I continued working for AEG remotely
Uh-huh.
and been with them the whole time. I've been with AEG for about, gosh, 14, 15 years at this
Wow.
point. I'm not remembering my old dates correctly,
Yeah.
but yeah, about 14 or 15 years. And at one point, we transitioned from collectible card games into the board game market as it
Mm-hmm.
was exploding. And I've been doing that ever since.
Awesome, awesome. So AEG now has a pretty big catalog of different types of titles that they support now, whether it be traditional board games to card games to games like Smash Up, where it's a deck builder in a box.
Basically.
Yeah, what is your favorite type of game to work on and to develop?
Oh, wow. That is a tough one. I like working on games that are doing something relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
When we did Smash Up, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was new to me because I worked on card games before. I worked on
Uh-huh.
Legend of Five Rings, Warlord. So in that sense, it was a card game. I understood it. It was new. But when we brought out Mystic Veil and we began doing the clear card, which is our card crafting thing, where you not only build your deck, but you actually build the cards. You're changing what every card does with these clear card sleeves. That was something completely new. And that was very exciting. And now we're moving that the ability we've learned to do the clear cards and the card sleeving into all kinds of other types of games,
Mm-hmm.
which is really exciting too. But I have to say, one of the most fun things for me when it comes to the games is the creative process of building the look of the game and the world of the game.
Mm-hmm.
There are people at the company who are I'd say better game designers, better game developers of the mechanics than I am. I'm a bit more of a world builder type, and
Yeah.
really enjoy that side of it.
Well, as a graphic designer myself, I don't knock you for being one for the aesthetics. Speaking of art direction in games, you are the art director for Smash Up.
I am.
And what kind of got you involved in art directing games in general, and then more specifically, what brought you into being the creative head for the look of Smash Up?
Well, so what got me into it, funny enough, what got me into it was the fact that at AEG, people have to wear a lot of hats. And when
Uh-huh.
I took over Warlord, one of the responsibilities was to, make sure all the art got done.
Mm-hmm.
And even back in those days, and especially with Legend of the Five Rings,
Mm-hmm.
AEG has always been a very big story-driven company. Most of our games, we really care about the characters, and they look like they come from a world. And with Legend of the Five Rings at the time, it had this ongoing storyline that was so important to what the game was. So when I took that over and I was doing art direction for that, you really had to pay attention to what you were doing and what characters you were using and whether you were using them correctly. And so as I did that more and more throughout both of those games, when we got to the board games and I began to take over more of the board games, it just sort of fell to me to begin doing the art and look for a lot of them. And I'm not saying I'm the only one. There were other art directors with me back in the day who were responsible for the look of some beautiful games we did in the early days. But when Smash Up came along, it was definitely on my plate, and it was. Smash Up's been fun because Smash Up's sort of been like my own little personal playground. I could just kind of do whatever silliness came to mind and just sort of infuse a sense of humor into the game that has been a great deal of fun to work with.
That's awesome. So, do you work on the art yourself, or are you reaching out to a art department and they're doing all the digital painting and that?
Well, actually, yes, I am purely art directing. I couldn't draw a stick figure if I needed to, but I'm coming up with all the descriptions, and I work with not only with art houses, but I also work with individual artists who we've met, different freelancers and things like that. And we have a pretty big Rolodex of them, and I will just go through and find the people who I think can do that style of the faction the best. And I have had this policy that every time we have a new faction in the game, however many cards it is, it's usually only about 13 to 15 cards. But even then, all of them always go to a single artist or art house. So that faction always has an internal consistency to their look. And then later you may have, in fact, Smash Up has a lot of cameos of other factions on other cards. We just make sure that the current artist of that faction gets a whole lot of source material from the old art to make sure that those characters look
That's
accurate.
awesome. That's awesome. And what was so Smash Up has this very digital painted sort of look, very bright, vibrant colors. What drew you to that aesthetic, and why did you go down that path? And were there any other paths that you kind of looked at as well?
Well, there were, with most games, and with us being a company that has a history with a lot of what I would call heavier themes and, heavy fantasy and big dragons and big guys with axes and, that sort of stuff. You always have that tendency to first look at a game for, oh, how awesome can it be? But the more we played Smash Up, and it was pretty evident at the outset that Smash Up at its core was a lighter, funnier game. It was not about being this, big, heavy fight game. It was meant to be fun, and it was a game that even younger players were going to be able to get. And so I knew that I wanted to set a lighter palette, a lighter tone for the game. We wanted to have cool pieces that everybody could look at and say, oh, that character looks cool. But at the same time, we were also going to have some goofy stuff going on as well, and to make sure that it has a lot of pop culture references, self-referential stuff between the sets and things like that, so that even a game that doesn't necessarily have a story or a quote world sort of began to develop its own world over the course of time.
I definitely can say from my personal experience, I've noticed that from the very first expansion of the game, you could tell that you guys were laying the groundwork for a lot more tongue-in-cheek of a tone with the game. The first set did seem a little bit more serious, but as you got into the plants, ghosts, and all that, and the expansion was called Awesome Level 9000.
9000.
Yeah, and then you go all the way to pretty Smash Up, and then you go even further into the cease and desist. You really have kind of unhinged a little bit, and I like that Smash Up has continued to grow in such a comical way, because the card artwork for Pretty, I just picked that up and played a little bit of that with my friends last night, and it was really enjoyable, really fun, really engaging, and I really liked that it went in this weird direction that when you look at the original Smash Up, you're like, no way they're going to be playing against kittens and princesses, but here we are now,
Yes, and not just that, but zombie princesses,
exactly,
and dinosaur kittens,
Yeah, and that's the other great thing about Smash Up is it's combining those things together.
I kind of liken it, as I think about it, I kind of liken it to a lot of TV shows in the first season when the actors are still sort of learning their characters. And the base set of Smash Up has a lot of fun, and it's a really good looking set. I'm proud of it. But yeah, Smash Up has kind of grown into its own as it went along with the sense of humor that it sort of naturally developed. We're having a lot of fun with some of the factions we're bringing out now. But even back then, we did always have sort of an irreverent silliness, and there's always fun stories when we were doing the dinosaurs. I got the sketches in for dinosaurs. And this was a number of years ago. And my kids, who are now 10 and 8 at the time, were, I believe, like 3 and 5. And I showed them the dinosaur sketches because, they're little boys. They love dinosaurs, right? And my oldest one, the first thing he said was that they need lasers.
They need lasers.
And I sat there for a minute and I said, you know what, son, you are absolutely right. These dinosaurs need lasers. And that changed the entire look of that faction. They became dinosaurs with lasers and missiles.
That's awesome.
And,
that's awesome how your kids sort of participated in the creation of what Smash Up is.
They did. That was their little stamp on it, and we gave them a little special shout out on the credits. And then later, funny enough, you mentioned Pretty Pretty. Almost all of the development staff on Smash Up, myself, Paul, Kalissa, who is our graphic designer on it, had all had daughters about the same that were about the same age, and so we dedicated Pretty Pretty Smash Up to them because we all had about 3 to 4 year old daughters at the time.
That's super cool.
It's all in the family.
Yeah, I like that philosophy.
I mean, I can let you in on all kinds of little secrets in the art. There's always kind of funny stuff like that.
Yeah. Why don't you share some stories about the development of the art while I clearly need to think up more questions here?
Well, a lot of the development of the art was the idea of trying to hide jokes and hide references and see what we could get away with. Obviously, a set like Cease and Desist is pushing the limit of what we can get away with, but we did learn a lot about that. But there's always been little hidden things. Like if you go back to the dinosaurs again, it's difficult to see on the card. You usually need one of the masterpieces of art, which are out there on the artist portfolios and stuff. But if you go to the dinosaurs and you look at their equipment, their weapons, their lasers, their armor, and you zoom in on it, you'll see little serial numbers on it. And if you look real close at the serial numbers, they're a combination of letters and numbers that spell out the names of the corresponding dinosaurs from Dinosaur Train on PBS. So the T-Rex has Buddy on there as a serial number, and the Pterodon has the other character. And if you look at the zombies, you'll see some references to some of our other games we've put out. But then you'll also see little things like the Mall, which is the Rhodes Plaza Mall, which is, of course, a call out to Captain Rhodes from the original Day of the Dead back in the 80s, the leader of the army there. And if you look at the guy in the riot gear on the No More Bullets card, you'll see that his name tag on his chest is Steel, which is another character from the old Day of the Dead movie.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So
I like
to work in those kinds of
I definitely
things.
do like little Easter eggs like that. What was your favorite faction to work on as a designer or as a art director, I should say? Like what did you have the most fun coming up with?
It is hard to say because we're at over 50 factions at this point.
Yeah, that's what Paul was saying.
I know. I'll let you in. One of the most fun I had was we just did a promotional set, and it's coming out this summer, and it's a retailer support set. Like it's go to your retail store and play Smash Up there this weekend, and there'll be some prizes that you'll get. And it's basically a way to bring customers into the store to play Smash Up so that other customers see people playing Smash Up and the store might, be able to sell more. But we wanted to give away a faction. We wanted to make a one-off faction that you could get by coming to the store and taking part. Free to the players. And we were trying to come up with what we wanted to do. And Paul had the idea, why don't we do this set called Smash Up AllStars? And we'll take one card from every faction so far, and one minion from this, one action from that, etc. And we'll make a whole new faction made up of the old cards. Then that's a great way to introduce new people to the game. The store can give them this pack, and it'll have a pirate and a ninja and a zombie.
So they have all the same abilities that their original cards had.
It's the exact same card. Yeah. Okay. So for instance, if the Pirate King were in the set, it would be exactly the same. And so when we got to work on the set, I realized pretty quickly I don't want to use the same art, because if I do that, if they look exactly the same and you're playing against them, you're gonna lose track of whose card is whose on the table eventually, and it's going to be a bit of a mess. So we decided to reskin them, and since they had been called the Smash Up AllStars this whole time, I decided the best choice of all would be to put them on a basketball team. So it's all these different Smash Up characters envisioned as if they were on a all-star basketball team, which of course plays in space.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do.
I was going to ask before you mentioned that was
basketball in space.
I was going to ask when you started to bring this up. Can you or can you not confirm that that decision was inspired by Space Jam?
It may have very well been inspired by Space Jam. I can say that. But we got to have a lot. It made it for so much fun because, for instance, we have one of the ninjas from the ninja faction, and of course, every character has their normal clothing on, but they also have the blue jersey for their team. And you see the opposing player who's in their gray uniform, and he's holding the deflating ball that has two ninja stars in it from the Seeing Stars card, and then from our obligatory Cthulhu set, there's a card where the opposing player is going up for a shot, and a giant tentacle is breaking out of the floor to block the shot, while the cultist is standing over there doing his little mind stuff.
That's great. That's great.
And just all these kind of jokes, because we were able to go back to these characters that we've been playing with for so long and just goof on them a lot. And then of course, sets like Cease and Desist were an absolute blast because I was a kid of the 80s, and we were making fun of so many properties that we grew up with in that set, and but at the same time we were joking on them, but it was coming out of a place of love, right? Because we grew up with these things and we love them, and to be able to just kind of goof on the things that made us laugh when we were younger and that make us laugh now looking back at it. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm actually really excited about the All-Stars set. I didn't know that it was going to be just kind of reworkings of the same exact cards, kind of mixing them together. That's going to be really cool. I'm actually really interested to see how different cards sort of play off of each other, and will the synergy be there? I don't know.
Well, Paul and Brian, our playtest lead, they both worked really hard on this one, and they actually chose cards and playtested them pretty heavily to make sure that even though they're coming from disparate factions with different focuses, it does actually work as a deck. Like it has enough to make it function. So
looking at the future of Smash Up, we have the All-Stars deck coming out. We have the new expansion that's about to drop any day now.
Yes, later this month.
Yep, later this month. We have the sheep faction that's going to be coming out.
The sheep faction is when you can go to our website for Smash Up, and you'll find the link to apply for the sheep deck. All you have to do is give us, answer a few basic questions like, where do you buy Smash Up? How many times a week do you play Smash Up? Things like that. Just the things that we like to know about our customers so that we can make games better for them. And put in your email address and your mailing address. And then later this year, after we've finished printing and everything, we're going to send everybody a sheep deck for free. And we were playtesting last night, and the sheep are pretty amazing, actually. Their whole mechanic, because every faction has its own thematic mechanic, is following. So they just follow other cards as like an opponent moves their characters around, the sheep cards just follow them from one base to another. And
that's awesome. That's awesome.
It can be surprisingly powerful. You pair them up with certain groups, and you're like, wow, I can't get rid of these guys.
Well, that's something that I always really enjoy about Smash Up. Every new expansion that we play, it does feel like an entirely different game because there's always something that you haven't experienced before. Like we were just playing with Pretty Pretty last night, and the cats have that mechanic of dropping enemies attack down, but then being able to steal enemies. And we were like popping bases, and then we were like, does this card go back into your hand with like the interaction that this happened? So really cool stuff that kind of comes to play with that. Like my buddy Ryan was playing Cats and Ninjas, and he stole a minion, and then he played the ninja card that returned one of your minions back into your hand. And so he returned my minion into his hand. And then we were like, is that yours for the rest of the game? And we're like, I think so. So
yeah, we actually put out some new additions to the rule book to clarify about owning versus controlling and what happens when that happens. You're right. He would have gone into his hand, but the next time that minion was destroyed or went to a discard pile, it would return.
It would return to my
just,
discard pile.
Just to clarify.
Okay,
yes.
yeah. So we did not play that way because we were like, we're not sure. So that's good to know that there was an addendum to that rule booklet. So recently, Smash Up has been brought to digital platforms. And I was talking about this a bit with Paul and how that was kind of the plan all along, and it's just kind of recently come to fruition. On the AEG side, what was that process like, at least with the current developer? And were you art directing that? How did you transition into working with that team on the digital space?
Sure. Well, currently we are working with Nomad Games, who also brought out Talisman. That's the other one they're really known for.
Yes.
A great implementation of Talisman. We had worked with another company before. We were working with them on our digital stuff, and that didn't pan out. And it was kind of on the shelf for a while. We were focused on the physical game and other games that had coming out, things like that. And when we were later approached by Nomad, and Nomad went to work. They have been incredible. In fact, I pretty much provided them the assets.
Yeah.
And they went to town. And then, a few months later, they began sending us screens and just had us look at them and kind of say, oh, is this good? And one of the things the approach I had taken with them, and I wanted to let them understand right away, which was good for them, I believe, was that, I understand that the online media is a different media than the table. And if the implementation of the game needs to change just a little bit to better serve the format you're playing it in, that's great. Just let us know. And if there are cards that may be problematic in an online real-time environment, or actually I should say, if you're doing like a play and pass type thing,
yeah, exactly,
a type of card that might be problematic, that's fine if you're sitting around a table. I had always left it to them to say, just let us know. And if we need to tweak something in the online version, we want each version to be the best it can be.
Yeah, absolutely.
If there's something you can do in the physical space that's really awesome, we're going to do it. And if there's something that doesn't necessarily translate to the digital, we'll figure out a way to change it to make it something equally cool. So far, things have been working pretty smoothly, and they are going to be introducing even more factions as they continue.
Oh wow! So they're developing factions on their own outside of.
Well, no, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. Not outside. They're going to be bringing additional factions from our expansions.
Gotcha.
Over time, they're going to add some more of them in.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So what's in the I haven't played the digital version yet. I'm planning on doing some videos for our channel next week to kind of tease, that this is what's coming, for the next short documentary form in that.
Right. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So what factions are in there? Is it just the base set right now?
It's just the base set.
Okay.
It is just the base set right now. And because they were also working up AIs for it and everything. And with Smash Up, it's the same issue we run into with playtest sometime, is that we've reached like a factor of combinations at this point that is so huge that it's difficult to think of all the possible iterations that can happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And we know with our physical playtest, our main method of approaching that has been just to continually add more teams and just attack it by numbers, right? We have so many teams playtesting so many things. And then we also have a few focus directions. Like we'll have a faction that we're coming out with, and we already have an inkling that it might be a little too strong with two or three of these others. Yeah. So we really put them all, we're saying, okay, focus on these, but also play whichever ones come to mind.
Okay.
And we get all that feedback in, and then we incorporate it into the development process.
Very cool.
So, but we are reaching a point where there are so many that you kind of get to a point where you're like, well, we play tested it the best we could, and now,
yeah, that was a main question that I was mentioning to my friends that we were having this conversation today. Last night we were talking about it, and their biggest question was, how does it happen that, or how did they balance all of this? It's one thing to do it digitally where you can keep going in and retooling and things like that. But when you're dealing with cards that are already printed and you have an idea, do you feel constricted by that design space, or do you still just kind of print the card and you're like, well, it is what it is. And there will be a combination that can counter this if the draw is correct or something like that.
There's a bit of that, but we do have a pretty robust playtest process. We have upwards of about 40 different teams around the world who all are fantastic, who volunteer for us. Brian Stout is our playtest coordinator, and a huge shout out to him for helping coordinate all these guys for us. And as these groups play, these guys and girls, they are giving us some of the best feedback you could possibly get. And we incorporate as much of it as possible. And, Paul gets basically like a distilled report every week of what's been coming in. Like Brian keeps a tab on it, and we'll send a report to both of us and say, they've been seeing a lot of problems with, if you put the monkeys with the spies, it's causing this kind of issue and blah, blah, blah. And then Paul will begin to address that in the cards and just send out another round of PDFs to them that they cut and print and play and send their feedback in for the next iteration. And we do that for about, we'll spend anywhere from, 4 or 5 months of just play testing. Just play testing.
That's
and getting
awesome.
as much feedback as we can. And we're generally doing it even right up to the last minute, because as we're preparing the press files and getting ready to go, Callie will still be able to take those last minute tweaks and work them into the press file before it goes, and we do our last little,
absolutely
proofing check.
I do know how that goes as a graphic designer myself.
Bet you do.
Yeah. Well, that's really exciting, and I'm definitely very pleased that Smash Up has made its way to the digital realm and all of that, because this is a game that I cannot express how much I love this game. I was telling this to Paul that my first 3 games when I started getting into board games was, first I played Munchkins, then they had me play Arkham Horror.
Oh, of course.
Going to 11.
Well, that was a bit of a jump. But there you go.
Yeah. But then we played Smash Up, and then we proceeded to play Smash Up every single week for about 7 months to 10 months straight. Like, we played every single week. Like, we would start with a new game and be like, all right, let's learn the new game. And then when it got to like 8:30, 9 o'clock, we switched to Smash Up because we were just all so comfortable with it.
That's awesome. I love hearing that from people. What we do, what we spend all day doing, to hear from people that they really enjoy it just makes the whole thing so worthwhile. Because making games and all that, it is a dream job, and don't ever let anybody tell you it isn't. But it is work too. It's a lot of work, and it's long hours and long nights.
I know. I
travel, etc. But when you do see the people playing and having so much fun, that just it makes everything so much more than worth it.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Well, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for sharing your insight on Smash Up and how it kind of came to be. And I think this definitely gives me a lot of great information to work on my video between the interview with Paul and the interview with you. I think I have some really good stuff here, and I'm excited to get the video together, and I'm excited to share it with you guys so that you can see it.
Well, awesome, Kevin. I appreciate you taking the time. I really do. I look forward to seeing it.
Absolutely. Well, for everyone who's watching at home, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time on Sidecar Games.